we get to say, we do our best and we let God do the rest. That is the line that I use over and over again to breathe truth into myself and for the Spirit to breathe truth, I guess, into our staff, because there are big things that we face as we enter into the lives of those who are vulnerable.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for The Forum, author and speaker. In this episode, I ask Jenessa Fillipi, did Jesus really need a place to rest his head? The question has its roots in Matthew 8, in which we encounter a scribe who promises Jesus that he will follow him wherever he goes. Jesus replies in a way that leaves us scratching our heads a bit. Foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. Now, theologians have discussed the many ways this line can be interpreted, but for today's purposes, we're going to zero in on the idea that Jesus did not have a resting place on the earth. An idea that I know, for me at least, strikes me in the heart, calling me to a new awareness of sorts. What is it like to not have a place in which to rest our heads? To have a place of rest and comfort at the end of the day? In her work as a school counselor, Jenessa confronted the reality of Jesus' lack of a place to rest his head when some of her students quietly revealed that they slept and ate on the floor of their homes. This realization stirred her heart to action, and in 2017, Jenessa founded the nonprofit ministry Down Home, which provides furnishing and decor to families who might have a home, but still no place to rest their heads. Along with this, she recently was bestowed the title of 2024 National Mother of the Year by American Mothers Incorporated. But before this crowning happened, she claimed other titles: sister, wife, mother of four, and daughter of the King, Jesus Christ. How did she get to this place of being honored nationally? And what is the story behind Down Home? Jenessa has a beautiful message to share, so sit back and enjoy, and maybe have some tissues nearby too, just in case. Jenessa, thank you so much for coming into the Forum podcast booth today. I called it a studio once, and I guess it's not quite that, but we do what we can. So
Thanks, Roxanne, for having me. It's a blessing.
Yeah. Well, I've interviewed you before, but I know every conversation is a little bit different, so I'm looking forward to it, and I know we'll enjoy this time together. So, and when I started the podcast in January, I really felt like I had interviewed so many amazing people, but these interviews were kind of like this secret little conversation, and then the story that would come out would only just have like a little few clips, right? And that was one of the reasons I really wanted to start a podcast, because I wanted people to be able to share their heart. And for the most part, I've stuck with people that I know already, and mostly in our community. Sometimes I reach out beyond, but you're one of those that is not only in our community, but I've known you in a variety of different ways. But it really started back in your school counseling days. My kids were at Nativity Elementary, and you were their school counselor. So why don't you share a little bit about, let's go back and talk a little bit about your faith journey and kind of go into your childhood. And tell me a little bit about how God was a part of your life and weaved in and out of your life.
Absolutely. I grew up in a small town north of Crookston, grew up on a farm, 2 brothers, and a wonderful community of believers. If you weren't Catholic, you were Lutheran. Was really the community that I grew up in. My faith formation came primarily out of a small country church, Florian, very Polish, and the faith there still resonates within me far beyond what I could have imagined when I was young. And the community itself very much surrounded each one of us with the belief that we were capable of more, and the adults that were in our community, the opportunities that we had. Grew up in just a really beautiful small town community that believed in each other and helped each other out.
Tell me about your siblings, your parents, a little bit about your family makeup.
Yes, my mother, Charlene, she worked at the local bank the entire time that I was growing up. And my dad, Larry, worked at the grain elevator. And then my older brother, Braden, he is also now here in Moorhead where I live. And then my younger brother, Tyson, also lives in Moorhead. But we grew up on a small farm, and my grandpa, Valerian, lived on that same yard in a separate house. Very much family and faith and community were a part of who we were. And, the many blessings that come from it that you don't realize when you're growing up in it, how the Lord starts connecting the dots long after those initial stages or the initial groundwork.
Yeah, it's exciting, I think, when you're in your 30s, 40s, and you can look back and begin to see the story, the pattern of your life in a way that you can't when it's unfolding. But now that you're there, look back a little bit and share a little bit about that faith journey. What were some of the highlights and maybe some of the lowlights too? Like, no faith journey is like a straight shot, right?
Yes, like any teenager, it was an opportunity in my teenage years to be able to, enter in and try new things and have slip ups and learn from them. Thankfully, there are opportunities within that when you make mistakes and still living under the roof of your parents. What great opportunity there is to be able to then set the stage for more that the Lord has in store. I was a junior in high school, and I had gotten in trouble with the law a second time. Nothing major, but I did, drink underage. And at that time, that was where I would say a pivotal turning point happened, because there were consequences for my actions in regards to not being able to go out for the sports or the different things that I was signed up for. And also the feeling of shame when you do grow up in a small community. Everyone hears about things almost before they even happen. And I very much knew that the choices that I made were not who I am or who the Lord was calling me to be. Thankfully, my parents, they connected me with our local priest at that time, and he had borrowed a book to me called Hind's Feet on High Places. And growing up on the farm, I had a lot of time on my hands as I was home grounded during this period of time. But reading that book and taking the opportunity to sit with Father Don Brockman, who was the priest there at Florian at the time, really helped me see a broader picture, one that throughout my religious formation had not quite come to fruition yet. And because of that point in my life, it really helped me enter into my next stage of life already having more of a faith formation. So I entered college with a different mindset in regards to who I wanted to choose to surround myself with, as well as things that I wanted to get involved in.
I want to stop you because I think what's interesting about that is I don't know that every teenager whose parents say, here, we're going to give you to this priest over here, would be receptive to that. I don't know if you were right away or what happened, like where God kind of like unchained some of those. I'm imagining myself as a kind of a feisty teenager, maybe a little bit rebellious here and there. How did that go? Like, were you mad at your parents? Where were you at? What was the state of your mind and your heart right then? From what you can recall.
Right. I was not innately rebellious. I liked to fit in.
Okay.
I liked to hang out with friends and be part of what was going on. And that really is what led me into choices that I wouldn't have probably made otherwise. And so this opportunity to be able to meet with Father Don, who our family had already built a positive relationship with, felt very, first of all, humbling. It's not as though I wasn't anxious, because I was. To share with anyone areas of weakness and mistakes that you've made is hard. But entering into the hard and exposing it and sharing it out loud really does allow freedom to happen, to say, yes, those choices are part of my story, yet they aren't who I am. And so I would say that I didn't rebel against it at all, because I was longing for more at that time in my life. And in a small town, it's not as though we had opportunities abounding in comparison to what my own children have now. And so going to a priest very much felt natural, given our community.
I was thinking a couple of things too to add on to that. One, as young people, as much as our parents are important, there is a point where I remember a couple of adults in my life that were kind of like mentors to me. And I've looked back and thought, well, my mom in particular was just a great person and a mom, always there for me, but I needed something else. I needed someone else, another voice. And then the other thing is, what impresses me is that you knew that what your behavior wasn't matching up with who you are. I think I had moments of that too, but I think there's other people that maybe don't get that for whatever reason, that groundwork isn't laid. And so maybe they figure that out later, but for a long time, maybe they, for whatever woundedness or whatever, they go along with that. And I would say there were points in my life where I did that, where I was a little bit rebellious. My dad drank, and I was fighting that. He had didn't have jobs for some years in there, and he had started as a teacher, and there was a sadness there. And I think I kind of a little bit of a surrender, like, fine, if this is the way it's going to be, But thankfully, there was a sense in me too that no, there's something better. So I relate to both of those things, and it's just interesting to kind of look back and analyze that. But anyway, you were starting to go more into so now you're going out into the world with college, and you've had this experience. Thankfully, you had that in high school, right? So that when you're launched, now you have this little nugget of, okay, I can make these kinds of choices or these kinds of choices. So share a little bit about that journey then and how college went for you.
Absolutely. One of the people in my high school that did play another pivotal role, her name is Jill Adelson, and she was my high school counselor. And so she is part of the story that helped lead me into the next stage as I went off to college. But Jill was someone that had a personality. She herself was a counselor. And so she had the personality of just acceptance and recognition, and really looking at someone and helping them feel valued and know that they're valued in an important part of the classroom, a part of the community. And I really took that with me as I went on to college. Entering college, I went to Minnesota State University, Moorhead. Go Dragons.
Yes, me too.
And I knew that I wanted to get involved in a faith community. And at that time, there was the Newman Center on campus. And that helped really set a solid foundation at college of other believers, of other people who were striving to learn more about who they are, learn more about the next stage in their journey, but also do that in a way to connect with others with similar values. Mm-hmm. That was an extreme blessing to have on campus. Mm-hmm. I did live on campus, and I also worked at the Livingston Lord Library, in which I had incredible mentors, both men and women, that even though at that time maybe my faith was, I was very open about who I was, my faith, and they all just really loved up on me in regards to building me up and helping me see that there was a greater leader in me than I think I even knew myself. My sophomore year in college is when I took a year off and I served with NET Ministries. So NET is National Evangelization Team. based out of St. Paul. And we went across the United States in vans and we shared the good news. We shared the gospel. We went into churches, we went into schools and did religious retreats for thousands of youth across the nation. And that was another very pivotal part of my journey.
I just am curious how you got connected with NET, and was there anyone else that you knew that was on the team, or did you just jump in fresh?
My freshman year, as I got involved at the Newman Center, someone else that I knew from my hometown, Karen Skolarski, she had just recently served on NET Ministries and had connected me with some other people that had served that were now local, Mark Holcraft being another one. And I was just really intrigued. And I knew of NET Ministries because they had come to our school. It was the day that all the students got let out of school to be able to go to a faith formation retreat. The Catholics went to NET Ministry, to the NET retreat, and the Lutherans went to their local church. And
yes. And it was a public school?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And that was the first time that I had seen Catholic men and women that were in their early 20s on fire for the Lord. Because growing up in a small community, we definitely had exceptional faith formation. It was very traditional in format, went through the curriculum and learned the prayers. Yet to watch young men and women pray spontaneously and have this joy that was a little bit beyond reason. It's intriguing.
Yeah.
And so all of those really led me into looking into the possibility of serving with NET Ministries.
Were you afraid of letting go of college? Or, when you're young, no, you're not afraid at that age. You just want to experience everything that you can, right? And so what were some of the things that you did experience?
Right. Well, I will say that while I was not really afraid, my parents were.
She's going to leave and not finish college.
Right. That is it. First generation going off to college. And there was a fear. And my mom and dad will speak openly about that they went to a priest at the time, Monsignor Mike Fultz, and wanted to learn more about what is NET Ministries. Did he know more about it? And my mom has shared the story several times that Father or Monsignor Fultz at the time said, if this is as big of an issue as you have, he said, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. And it really helped reassure them that NET Ministries was definitely worth a year off from college. And when I came back, then really what I had gained from NET Ministries was a much stronger foundation in Catholicism, but also seeing people across the entire nation who were struggling with their faith, with family, with all the things, right? All the things that communities and people struggle with. To be able to see it in a broader scope, I can see the connectedness to the work that I entered into as a school counselor.
Your heart was open. And then you had the influence of your school counselor too. So you come back to school after that year and now your path is kind of set. Is that what happened?
It was. Okay. You enter into your sophomore, junior year and you really got to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I graduated with my undergrad in teaching, social studies, education. And then I went right on into the master's program at MSUM for school counseling specifically.
Okay. So that was your dream. That was the goal.
That was the goal. I knew that what I had seen in my school counselor was definitely something that resonated with who I am. When I thought about the things that I'm really good at and the things and people that I care about, school counseling really helped fit the bill. And then when I entered into that program and we got to try out the different areas, elementary became very clear that was where I was called to be, much more proactive and preventative in counseling.
I'm going to jump way ahead, then we're going to come back. Mm-hmm. But looking back now, as we said, you look back in hindsight, you can connect the dots. It's interesting to like kind of peer into what God was doing and leading you in this direction. So you started at school. What was the first school that you were a counselor at?
I was at Nativity
okay.
and Holy Spirit here in Fargo.
Okay. So tell us about that and how you started getting a little bit of at some point you switched schools and everything, but what was God doing in your heart, in your soul during that time to have the epiphany that you did, which started a ministry? we'll just like put that out there.
Isn't this it's wonderful to be able to think back. It was in my early 20s. I had already had 2 children. I had gone through my master's program and had 2 babies along that time. And when I entered in a Nativity and Holy Spirit, I loved everything about the environment. I loved being able to go in and do classroom lessons, be able to get to know each one of the students by name and help them know the value that they carry just by sharing the simple things such as a smile, encouragement. I also was able to do small groups with students, and it was called Peace Patrol at the time, where there were students that were trained in skills to be able to help others through problem solving while on the playground. Lots of beautiful elements at that time that was very fulfilling because I was able to be with students really from kindergarten until they transitioned all the way into middle school. And so a lot of those students that I got to know, I now see them as adults and interact with them and are able to celebrate how far they've come. Then it was 8 years in as an elementary counselor for the Catholic school system, and I knew the Lord was calling me to something different. I really didn't know what it was, felt unsettled. And it wasn't as though I didn't love the work, because I did. Just knew there was something else, and it would bring me to tears, to frustration. It's hard not knowing. It's hard not knowing why I felt unsettled. That was a really difficult time. And at that time, lots of prayer, lots of conversation with my husband. And there was an opening that came up in the Fargo public school system at Washington Elementary up in North Fargo. I applied and I got that position. So very bittersweet, yet knowing that there was purpose behind this transition, even though it was difficult to let go of this beautiful community of the John Paul II Catholic school system. Yet they really came with me. You know how that works when you make connections with people, and it's not as though it was a loss. It was really an opportunity to extend those connections beyond what I could have imagined.
And then at some point you began to see why you were moved over. So share a little moved over. Share a little bit about how God again was like kind of opening your heart to there's a reason why I nudged you over here.
It was my third year in at Washington. And during those first 3 years, lots of transitions as anyone has, as you transition from private education into public education, start seeing a lot more disparities. Really rose-colored glasses started coming off as it became very evident that children were coming to school lacking many different things. One of the areas that both my husband and I saw is a lack of an environment conducive to success. So a home environment that was not conducive to success. My husband, as a maintenance worker, would go in and he would see in apartments really not many items. And in bedrooms, maybe a blanket on the floor with a stuffed animal. And I knew that there were students that were coming to school that had very similar realities. They were not getting good night's sleep. They were having trouble focusing in school and, of course, managing emotions and the entire ripple effect of unable to learn in that environment. And as a counselor, I would meet with the students, yet I knew that I needed to tap in to the core of the issue. And in order to do that, I needed to reach the family, the mom or dad or whatever that family unit looked like. And I was unable to do that as an elementary counselor, at least to the extent that I was feeling called to. It was the fall of 2017. And my husband and I had some quiet moments. Our kids were starting to get older. And although at that time our children were ages 2 to 12, and I was reading a book, and I, once again, compelled to say out loud to my husband, I think the Lord is calling us to something. And I really didn't know what it was, but we had talked about different for-profit ventures. And none of them really ever seemed fitting. And there was this opportunity we knew to be able to fill a gap in our community that both of us saw, yet not quite sure what or how that was going to happen. My husband didn't say I was crazy, which, I mean, he maybe thought it. But
one of the things too is the fact that he was seeing it in a different sphere, because I feel like half the crazy ideas I have, like to bring my husband on board, if he doesn't, and same vice versa, he might have a crazy idea and I'm like, I don't know where this came from, or it's not something that's resonating with me. But for both of you to have it, because we can't do things alone. And especially a husband and wife team working together is so powerful. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but that's an amazing piece right there to be on the same page.
Roxanne, you are exactly right. I still marvel at the fact that my husband didn't say, don't you think we're busy enough? We both have full-time jobs and we have 4 children. Looking back and reflecting on how wild that yes was, because it is wild that we said yes. We went home from where we were at the time. We went home and asked our children the question, what makes our house a home? And it was a flood of revelation that started happening. It was our children sharing, it's the beds that we sleep on, the couch that we have, the table that we eat at. And all of a sudden, just this vision started coming of how we could potentially fill some gaps. The name Down Home came within that same weekend. Down Home comes from a song from the band Alabama, and the line goes, down home where they know you by name and treat you like family. Folks know when they're falling on hard times, they can fall back on those of us raised up down home. And so with that really at the core of who we are, family, community, dignity, stability, we started playing around with different ideas and sharing out loud, even with our children, until eventually we came upon this idea, divinely inspired, that we would take someone's empty space and turn it into a beautiful and dignified home. And at that time, of course, what we had available to us were items within our own home. And we had the privilege to be able to meet with different people in the community that confirmed that, yes, this gap is in the community. One of those people was Pastor Sue, who was at Churches United for the Homeless. And I remember coming with this piece of paper, this very basic business plan with this mission and vision and idea. And I remember Pastor Sue saying, yeah, there is certainly a gap. And why don't we just try it? And that just doesn't always happen, Roxanne.
Right.
Where people just say, let's just try it. Because I would say, even now, having entered into the nonprofit world, there are many more no's than yeses in many different ways. And for the Lord to have lined up these yeses and for us to have really the courage to enter in is something that I must say, for my husband to say, sure, let's set up meetings. I will go with you. We don't know what we're doing, but I'll be alongside you and we'll just see what the Lord has.
You know what?
Doesn't make sense.
To add to that, I'm stuck back on the fact that you brought this to your kids, because I think some people who are on a path and they have a family, they maybe verge into wanting to fulfill something within them, and somehow it can happen where your kids are on a different track, and there's just this little bit of time where you can be a parent who has a lot of influence on your children. And so to kind of veer off on a path separate from them as a self-fulfilling kind of thing, I just love how you brought them into it. Everyone was on board. That in itself is such a witness, you know?
Yes. And we all entered in blindly. The nonprofit world is not anything that I had ever had really a thought of. I mean, I knew there was nonprofits. I didn't know a whole lot about how they have the funds to be able to do what they do. Completely ill-equipped to start a nonprofit. Yet I remember going home at that time with our children to the farm that I grew up on to meet with my mom and dad and to share this idea out loud with them. And at that same time, my mom was having a stirring to do, she had been for many years, a stirring to do something different than work at the local bank. She felt as though her own gifts and talents were highly underutilized, and they were. She definitely had a beautiful presence there at the bank and enhanced it through who she was. Yet she knew there was more. And so when we shared this idea out loud, she was instantly in. And again, for these yeses to be lined up. So that very first family that we were privileged to serve was on December 23rd of 2017. It included my own family, children, my mom, my dad, and my brother, Tyson. We loaded up our vehicles and trailer like Ma and Pa Kettle, and with many items that either were from our homes. So our children were able to donate items that they no longer needed, such as wall hangings. And we found things in different ways. And we did that very first transformation for a mother and son, Antoinette and Ty. And we knew instantly that Down Home was more than just for our family. It was really meant to be for our community.
That's so exciting. Even though I've heard about it before, I love hearing about it again. And so in this podcast today, we're going to answer, did Jesus really need a place to rest his head? And I wanted to bring it back to that scripture where Jesus said, I don't even have a place to rest my head. I want to bring it back to that. Let's take a little pause, and then we'll kind of regroup and come back and dive into that, because I can't wait to hear like what that transformation is about. So we'll be right back with Jenessa Fillipi with Did Jesus really need a place to rest his head after this break?
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. This is Roxanne Solonin, your host, and we have Jenessa here. And we are just getting into the exciting part of her story where this nonprofit begins to unfold. And I was just, as I was preparing for this interview, I was thinking about a moment where I went on a March for Life trip to Washington, D.C. with one of my kids. I was a chaperone, and it's a bus ride, and it's a 25-hour each way bus ride. And you get on the bus, you don't stop at a hotel until you get there. So we're sleeping on the bus. By the end of this trip, you pretty much are going the whole time. I'm an introvert. I need my downtime. There's no downtime. It's just high energy, super exciting, but just exhausting. And so on this particular trip, I've gone more than once, but this one I recall, we always end up going to the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. And we were there towards the end. Like, I think it was our very last day, very last hours. We were going to head back to Fargo after that. And I was exhausted. I was just exhausted. I think there were maybe some issues that I was dealing with as a mom. And I was just tired and I needed a place to rest my head. Well, in this basilica, there's all these different side shrines of Mary from all over the world. So you have one from China and one from Japan and one from Africa. And it's really cool. But I just found one and there was a bench in front of it and I just laid down. But you're on a hard wooden bench. But I just found solace in that. But it occurred to me, like some people don't have a pillow to rest their head on. And ever since that scripture passage about Jesus saying he doesn't have a place to rest his head on has really hit me in a different way. Because I just remember how exhausted I was, and I was receiving consolation, but it just opened me up to there's people that don't have this. That there's no relief. There's no place to go to the bathroom. There's no place to change your clothes. Like the dignity of not having the things that we've taken for granted. So I know that was kind of the heart of this nonprofit. So I want to hear more about it in whatever way you want to share what happened after that, how it grew, but how you continue to enter these lives. And I think it's going to have to do with probably relationship again, which is what God is, a relationship, and he wants that for us. So go ahead and continue onward.
The heart of Down Home ties back to my Down Home roots. Small town, knowing people by name and treating them like family. And we know that family looks different for many different people. And the idea of having a nonprofit available to people where we welcome them into our Down Home family is at the heart of who we are. We are furniture, decor, and so much more. Yes, a huge part of what we offer is that dignity and stability of having a couch to relax on at the end of the day, having a table to eat at. Roxanne, it is hard to articulate or put into words the realities that we see when we enter into these families' homes before we serve them. Part of our process is to go into their space, measure it out, learn more about who they are, what they like, what colors their children enjoy. And when we do that, we enter into a very humbling reality. There are oftentimes a blanket on the floor for a bed, or maybe a mattress that was pulled out of the garbage that now they are co-sleeping on, not, in the opposite direction that you would typically sleep on a bed. Maybe there's a table. We did see someone with the upside down tubs that they're using to carry their items as their table, or else we had someone that had a table top but no legs to it, so they had it just kind of propped on the floor. No beds to sleep on. It's really alarming when we think this is the reality for thousands of men, women, and children in our community who are truly striving to stabilize. These are kiddos that are expected to go to school. These are single mothers, single fathers who are trying to get their kids ready, plus secure a job, go to work, get to work, be productive at work, all of those things. And so once we meet with that family, then we go back to our warehouse up in North Fargo, and we live in a thriving community, very blessed with thousands of incredible donations that come from our community that then we get to start pulling. We call it our own personal home goods because it's all lovely, organized in a way where if we know a child really loves princesses or a boy really loves sports, then we can start pulling those items and putting them on these tables to start coordinating. And before you know it, we have hundreds of items that are now being coordinated because of hundreds of donors who say yes to our mission. And that coordination then all gets put into tubs. Then we get all of the big furniture items picked out and organized in preparation for the actual move-in day.
Before I go into the move-in day, because I want to hear, you've shared a little bit about it, but I want to hear a little bit about how God has continued to follow you, because I would think, first of all, it's scary to start a whole new thing that could go on for however into perpetuity. But how has he spoken to you in terms of growing it at an even pace that's not overwhelming? And also, I would think the thought of, am I doing enough? Or like, how do you balance all of that out with like his whisperings? Day by day.
Right, day by day. When we started out, we were completely volunteer. So for 3.5 years, it was this really difficult, it wasn't a balance. It was a really difficult time where I was working full time. My husband was working full time. We had our 4 beautiful children, and we were working around the clock to get this nonprofit to get down home up and running, for people to gain more visibility, for people to be able to enter in, to offer volunteer opportunities, all of these lovely elements that we knew were an important part of down home in order for it to be successful, yet not having quite the capacity for everything. Thankfully, the Lord does show up, and he shows off through people in our community. And there have been many people, especially at those beginning stages, that are really those unsung heroes that leaned in and said yes when we hardly knew what down home was. And then my prayer had been, Lord, make it very evident when it's time for me to make that transition from working at Washington to entering full-time at down home. And because there were financial pieces, and you take all of those things into consideration, some of that stability that we ourselves were afforded by having that full-time job. Well, COVID hit, and I did put 1 more year in at Washington. And I knew, because of all the restrictions that were going on, right, that were really out of many people's control. But I knew then that it was time that being an elementary counselor was time for me to transition full-time as executive director, because the need I knew was going to grow even from that time, from 2020.
Plus, there were requirements during COVID that were additional. And I can imagine your load was just a little bit too stacked.
It was. And we knew that the Lord was calling us regardless to enter in and still serve. So it was May of 2020, and we boldly entered into continuing to serve people in our community, because the need was still there, even with all of the uncertainty that was going on across our nation. As I entered in full-time in June of 2021, that is really where the Lord has positioned down home for so much more. I entered in full-time. My mom has been there since the beginning, and then we hired our very first other full-time at the end of 2021, and that is as a connections coordinator, that side of connecting with the clients that we serve, as I mentioned, not just during that time in preparation for the move-in, but also beyond. And we can talk more about that in a little bit as well. And then with all of the pieces of running a business, because even though it's a nonprofit, we really do need to function very much like a for-profit, where we have our employee handbooks, and we have all of these components, all of the financials, all of the meetings, all of the checks and balances that are extremely important for a nonprofit to function and grow and thrive. And there have been people that have been specifically positioned at different times throughout down home's formation and growth that are truly divine. It's hard to summarize how much the Lord has honored the work by our initial yes. And now we currently have 8 staff, 4 full-time, 4 part-time, and we are truly on the grow for even more impact in our community and potentially beyond in the near future.
Wow. I just I'm not a numbers person, even thinking that your mom who worked in a bank, was part of it. I'm sure it's beyond even her own expertise as it continues to grow. And then I was thinking, when you first started out, it's the heart that just led. And then thinking about Mother Teresa too, right? It was her heart that led to so many things. And then where her life went too, where she was begging people to help, when she had nothing. But I was thinking, if you could have looked in the future and seen all the things that you probably would have been too scared to do it, right? We can't function that way. We just have to go a day at a time, like we were saying earlier, right?
That's right. And Roxanne, I have jokingly, but kind of seriously said, if I had known then what I know now, I think I would have chickened out. And that's the reminder that the Lord, He honors our work by giving us just enough, just in time. He orders our work in a way that's manageable, but also the people are placed that help collaborate and complement who we are. And that's the gift of a growing staff, because while I knew I could essentially do all of the components, it didn't make me good at all the components of running down home. And as we've added staff, wow, what incredible game changers these other faith-filled women have been. And we have our warehouse gentlemen as well, but primarily led by women who boldly enter into more, because we are by no means have we arrived. We are continuously, looking at what we're currently doing, how can we serve more, what needs to be done a little bit differently, and empowering each other within our specific gifts that we bring to the table, yet also challenging in a positive way. What does the future look like for Down Home? And what a gift and privilege for all of us to be a part of the initial foundation.
Well, the other thing too is it's just so beautiful how the body of Christ, how Jesus works. If there's a good idea, but the thing is too, I'm going to back up real quick. You were in prayer. You weren't just charting a journey without God right there. I mean, you and your husband and your whole family were praying about this and very deliberate about that. And that's such a huge lesson too. And then once you accepted that yes, to see other people coming into that journey and seeing how God is allowing them to say yes. And then again, also how we need the suffering and the needy in our lives to provoke us to do God's work. And in the end, we're the ones, right, that receive the gift. It is just so amazing how it all works. And I know you've been living this. Share a little bit more about
prayer has been the prayer has been pivotal in the entire process. I am gifted with people in my life who are prayer warriors, who have helped instill a confidence in me that I wouldn't have on my own. And incorporating that in Down Home has been such a gift. Our stronghold is Luke 9:16. It comes from Luke 9:16, the miracle of the loaves and the fish, where the Lord took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and fed 5,000 hungry people. The math absolutely doesn't make sense. And yet that's the beauty of it, that we get to enter in with our little, because I came with so little. It really is true. I came with so little and I still have so little. And yet the Lord does immeasurably more than we can hope or imagine. And that's also the beauty of running a nonprofit where faith is core to who we are. We get to say, we do our best and we let God do the rest. That's a line from a dear friend who's since passed, Andy Olsenowski. But that is the line that I use over and over again to breathe truth into myself and for the Spirit to breathe truth, I guess, into our staff, because there are big things that we face as we enter into the lives of those who are vulnerable, as you mentioned, Roxanne, because we are entering into homes where they are in crisis, where they are struggling. There is mental health, there is poverty, there is illness, there is death, there is all of these earthly realities that families are facing that we also are privileged to be able to see a glimpse of it. And it's hard at times to see that reality. It's overwhelming at times to be faced with some of the things that our families face. And yet we have this beautiful gift of our faith that we can say, the Lord has it. We do what we can, and the Lord, He knows this. He's known this since the beginning of time. It's not on us. Like, we do what we can, and He takes it from there.
I was thinking about, as you were talking about, like the mental illness and the fact that you're a counselor. So yeah, you can't like fix everything, but at least you have like the education to be able to approach it in some way. And so that's so beautiful. And then I have a hard question for you. I want to know if you ever had a moment where you're like, no, I can't do this, Lord, this is too much. Or have you ever had like, did it always go smoothly? Did grace always flow perfectly? Or were there moments where you had to just surrender again?
That happens often because even as we add staff, as you add anything to a business, a program, there are going to be challenges and complications, yet not complications for the worse, yet opportunities to be innovative and think through how can we do this differently or what needs to be done differently. The most difficult time was when COVID hit. And we were running off of completely volunteers, myself included. And there was division, not in a negative way, just a lot of division due to confusion. And when we allow confusion to enter in, that is where really big questions come up of, well, how do we proceed? What do we do? What if we do that? What's going to happen? All of the what ifs. But even through that, I will say that the Lord has gifted me with a blind faith of knowing that He will share enough of His vision that I need at that point in time to say, no, this is the next. This is what I know to be true. And so when we said yes to serving more families in May, it was with humility, but also a boldness that down home is not mine. Down home is the Lord's. And I'm privileged to be a part of it for such a time as this, at this point in history. And like the saints that have gone before us, you talked Saint Mother Teresa, you just think like that is a calling that you just think, wow, no, that's a calling. But we're all called in that way to say yes to uncertainty, not necessarily to confusion, because that's where the enemy likes to enter into the confusion, where the Lord calls us to enter into uncertainty because He will equip us when we are vulnerable enough to say yes without seeing all of the next steps in place. That's where He will provide that next stage for more.
I want to talk about Mother of the Year because that's something exciting that's happened recently. We'll touch on that. But before that, can you share, if you can recall, some of the, like, your favorite moments in presenting a home with furnishings and decor, maybe just some little snippets so we can kind of get a sense of the joy that happens within you.
There are so many, Roxanne. It is really an experience like none other to be able to be a part of using these beautiful donations, loading them up in a U-Haul, bringing them over to someone's home. They leave for that hour and a half, 2 hours. We then get to use these beautiful donations and transform an empty space into this beautiful, dignified, personalized home. And some of the greatest moments are when the kids come in, especially those youngers, and they are just screaming with glee, with joy. There's the middle school kiddos that are saying, "Oh my goodness, we finally have a table." Those statements that are so candid, that hit the core of their reality and remind me of how blessed I am. And the kiddos that will say, "Oh my goodness, we finally have beds. I can finally have friends over to play." Yeah, I do suppose that if you don't have anything in your home, even though you're making friends at school, you don't have a place to invite them. And there's someone that we served early on that she wrote us a card after we had celebrated Christmas. We do our down home Christmas event where we invite everyone that we've served. And we provide Christmas tree packages to those served in the current year, and then traditions packages, which is like a hot cocoa kit, cookie making kit, a book, game, other things that help bring people together. We provide those for everyone. But after this particular Christmas event, we had gotten a card from Debbie Rudrud is her name, and she has been a lovely witness to the work that we do. She she wrote a Christmas card to us, and it said, "I just want to thank you for the work that you do, because I remember being a child and being so embarrassed because I did not have a place to bring my friends to, and that was never my reality, to have a place to call really home. And so thank you for giving that gift to children in our community." And, sorry. To know that the work that we're doing has these eternal impacts is beyond words. Knowing that we are a part of helping break generational poverty for those that would be unable to do it on their own, and for men, women, and children to feel connected to the community in these powerful ways. Because I mentioned, we are not just the furniture and decor. We do intentional follow-ups and touch points with those that we serve, provide birthday packages for the children all the way up until 18. And so I think we've already delivered 60 birthday packages since the beginning of this year.
Wow.
Because our down home family continues to grow.
Yeah. The words that came to me as you were talking about that was, you're in a privileged place, and a lot of us don't get that peak, and it's easy to go about our lives and we have our own things to deal with, but to be able to have that privilege peak and to invite others into that very vulnerable place, like you said, a place of humility, it really is. I mean, you can see that God has called you into that, and He is very pleased with your yes. So, leading up to that, recently you were crowned Mother of the Year nationally for Minnesota. The last time I interviewed you, we were just talking local, but now you're bigger than that. So I have to ask you about a story about because I was wondering about how your kids were perceiving this new designation as their mother that they know on an everyday basis, from good to bad to glory to what they were saying about you being Mother of the Year. Share a little bit about that.
That was really funny. So we have dear friends, that are friends of our children. And the running joke was, well, you're the son of the MOTY, Mother of the Year. And it's just really fun to be able to recognize the gift of family, the gift of community in that way. And so my children just love to kind of tease me a little bit about that.
So tell us about your recent being crowned, or I don't know how.
Yeah, and it's not. It isn't.
I see a crown. I know it's not really there, but
daughter of the king, right? We've said that, daughter of the king, and for such a time as this.
But you went to where were you at for that national event?
Yes, we were able to go to Omaha. I was named the Minnesota Mother of the Year, which then allowed me the opportunity to attend their convention, which was with such very timely. As someone, as a mother, as a woman leading a nonprofit, as someone who loves her family dearly, can also still feel very drained. And as you continue to give to others, it's not a, well, what about me mentality? It's more like, Lord, I know you know that my cup needs to be filled up. So lead me to that. And I do other pieces. I do read inspirational books and do other pieces to do that on a regular basis. But this opportunity to attend the national convention was in April. And instantly we arrived on Thursday. It's done on a Saturday. And you show up, you start meeting different people, and I just knew I was meant to be here. These are my people. These are dynamic women, movers and shakers across our nation who have powerful stories, who are doing incredible things in their community while also being humble and bold at the same time. The convention itself was very fulfilling, lots of great speakers and opportunities to connect with other women across the nation who were also representing their states, but also who are part of American Mothers. I did not know a lot about American Mothers prior to this recognition, and I do invite people to check out online who American Mothers, what they stand for. It really is about community, family, our nation. This was our 89th national convention, which means it started with the FDR administration in alignment with Mother's Day, yet also to really recognize women leading and paving the way for more within their families and communities.
I can imagine you being there and going, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. There's all these other women doing this and just feeling like I'm not alone. Right?
It was incredible because as you hear people's stories, you just think, oh my goodness, these women, what they're doing is beyond, and the things that they've experienced, so the stories that were shared, very much knew I was at home at this American Mothers Convention. And then on April 27th, which happens to be my son Adrian's birthday, and also the day that Pope John Paul II was canonized, I do believe. But I know there's an alignment in there. So just very much, all these different alignments. Attended the gala. So it's a beautiful gala where everyone attends, and then they announce the National Mother of the Year. And the Lord has been setting the stage for Down Home in really incredible ways through our staff, through the growth of our programming, serving more families, also really through partnerships within our community. And so when they were getting ready to announce the winner, or the one that was going to be honored as the National Mother of the Year, they also announced prior to that different nonprofits that are receiving a grant donation.
Oh, okay.
And Down Home was not announced. And I had the thought in my head, like, oh my gosh, it might be me. Like it actually, because I never thought, I wouldn't go there with that reason, but I knew, like Down Home, motherhood, family, children, all that aligned with the grants that I thought, I was like, I think it might be. And I don't mean that I truly mean that in a very humbled way, because there are points in your life where you just know that you're being called into more, and called into more through Down Home, I know is a reality, yet called into more to be available to speak truth into people in our community. I love classrooms. I love schools. I love young adults. I love being able to be in front of people and helping them see their value and worth. And when they announced me as the National Mother of the Year, I had an opportunity to go up front and share something that's been a gift to me as I was teaching something very similar as an elementary school counselor. And it's the reminder that each one of us have unique gifts and talents, but also unique things and people that we care about. And when we bring those together, we each have a one-of-a-kind, never been told before, and never to be told again story.
Yes.
And I was able to speak that in front of these hundreds of women, along with their families, and some had their children. And so now to really have a platform and an opportunity to share that message with more people, the message is for such a time as this. We are truly all an Esther from the Bible, where we either have the opportunity to enter in boldly and blindly, trusting that the Lord He has all the pieces lined up. We also have the opportunity to say, no, like I didn't need to show up, right? We don't need to show up to some of these things. And then if not us, then the Lord He will pave the way through someone else. And that's how the Lord works.
Yeah.
The Lord works in a way that will still honor the work that He wants to get done through us, yet we can either say, yes, please, or no, thank you. Right?
Like
those early on lessons.
He's got all these graces and He just waits for us to turn to Him and say, okay, I think I'm ready. And you have built me up to this place, so I will honor that. That's so beautiful. Well, thanks for sharing about that. And I just want to come back to our initial question, which is, did Jesus really need a place to rest His head? What was that all about? What how do you take that scripture passage?
Within Down Home, as I had shared, knowing that people truly did not have a place to rest their head, the mothers, I just put myself in their position if that was my reality, whereas I was trying to put my children to sleep, the best I could do was a blanket on the floor with, maybe one pillow or a stuffed animal, and there's nothing else in that space, just really empty. And the scripture, did Jesus really have a place to, lay His head? Really, I think of Mother Mary and her heart and her trust in God our Father, in the journey that she was witness to Jesus. Like, she didn't know what she was saying yes to either. And the women that we serve and the men that we serve, those that are parents, they don't know what their next day looks like. And so Down Home gets to help bridge a gap for them and gets to be a part of their story and a part of their yes for more for themselves and for their children, as we get to gift them with brand new mattresses and sheets and pillows, all of those components that are essential to a good night's sleep, but even more than that dignity that everyone deserves.
I want to kind of end with that piece of the relationship, because I'm assuming that when you started off and you had all these ideas, you had no idea like that you were going to do follow-ups and that you were going to build relationships with these people, but you can't like start something and not, there's the relationship there. Share a little bit about that to sort of end our segment today, about the blessing that's been for you for getting to know like these other souls, these other eternal souls.
Connection is part of who I am. I just naturally love to learn more about people, to share the gift of a smile, to help people believe in themselves, to encourage people to enter into more. Building them up and empowering them is at the heart of who I am and what I want other people to know. And I recognize that there's many people that weren't gifted with opportunities or family dynamics that helped them see their potential.
Mm-hmm.
And down home is that entry point for people to see, I am worthy. I am lovable. And there's this nonprofit called Down Home that faith is really at the core of who we are, and that's unapologetic. And we get to be an example and a witness of something that they've never experienced before. So they get to feel connected with something more than themselves, and also something more than they could have imagined without Down Home. The power of connection is just...
It could almost be down home hope. Hope is such a powerful thing. And I can just imagine that feeling of being lifted up, which I have been in different points in my life also. And love begets love. So it can't help but flow out continuously and circularly. And I just want to tell you, Jenessa, not everyone can see you, but you just are a beautiful person inside and out. And you have such a gift for communication too, that I know you're going to do an amazing job of representing the Mothers Organization, American Mothers, right? So they chose the right person. We're so proud of you. And we're just going to be praying for you also. And if anyone wants to get involved in Down Home, tell people what they can do.
Yes, they can go online. They can go to down-home.org to learn more about ways to get involved. You can also check us out on Facebook. We have really up-to-date reveals and different ways that the community has enhanced our work. We live in an incredible community. They are a community of movers and shakers, boots on the ground for the Lord. They show up and the Lord shows off through them. So please do check us out either online or give us a call.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being with us today on Matters of Soul Importance and sharing your story again. Now, even more people know about Down Home and the beautiful things that you're doing for the Lord. So I'm just grateful that you were here today.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Thank you. Did Jesus really need a place to rest his head? Jenessa Fillipi seems to have seen Jesus in the children she met as a school counselor who did not have some of their basic needs met, and it moved her heart, a heart that was formed by Jesus. And as she strained to hear his voice, a vision began to form in her head, a vision that has been affirmed over and over by the way her ministry Down Home has come together. It's one of the many examples of the body of Christ at work, but an inspiring one to all of us. When God calls us into the deep, will we be ready with our little daily yeses so that we can say yes to the big call? My discussion with Jenessa called to mind some of the situations I knew about growing up on the Fort Peck Reservation in Montana, where my parents were teachers, and my mom particularly, since her teaching career spanned 4 decades. One year, she learned that one of her students didn't have a place to lay his head at night. He had revealed to her that he was sleeping down by the railroad tracks, which were situated below the hill on which our town stood. We ended up bringing him into our home for an extended period of time, and he slept on our couch since we didn't have a lot of room, and my sister and I had smaller twin beds. I didn't have a little brother, and I was so happy with his presence in our home. I wished that it could have been permanent, but circumstances changed and he ultimately left. The memory of him being there, though, is something I'll always hold close. For me, it wasn't just about extending a hand to someone, but his very presence that meant so much to me. I just enjoyed having him in our home. What was it like for my little brother to sleep on a soft couch with a pillow instead of the hard dirt floor? How can I create that safe landing place for someone else in my life right now? What is God calling me to that would allow someone else the chance to feel hope? Definitely something to pray about. So thanks, Jenessa, for being that pebble in our shoe to get us thinking about the calling that only we can answer. Well, on that note, it seems perhaps fitting to share that when we return in a couple of weeks, my special guest will be a friend of mine from my hometown, Native American journalist Richard Peterson, who will answer the question, what is faith like on Fort Peck? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.